Hi guys, SilentWheel29 here. I'm back with a new deck profile, and this time I'm bringing you guys the new Twilight Synchro deck. This is probably one of my most favorite decks of all time. I really like this deck, and it does really great in the concurrent format. Um, but before we get to the deck, I want to say a few things. I'll be doing a few changes to my video, like the way I do my videos from now on. So first, I'll be going through the why I actually built this deck and what it's supposed to do, and how it's actually competing in the current format. And then I'll be showing you guys a few replays of the awesome duels that I've had with this deck. And then on a separate video, I'll actually be going over my card choices, so such as why I choose this specific card and why I choose a specific number of that specific card, and so on. So yeah, this is actually my first purely TCG deck that actually works really well. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started then. So the first question is, why did I build this deck? Well, I built this deck because I really like the Lightsworn archetype for their super fast milling power, and also for their versatility that most people take for granted. You have Lyla to pop back rows, you have Ehren to shuffle things back into the deck, and you have Lumina to basically call out almost anything from the extra deck, really. And I choose this variant over the others, such as the Saxon Ruler variants, because, well, I feel that the Saxon Ruler variant is kind of inconsistent. As in, if you don't open up with the right cards, you can have basically a dead hand, and I don't want to lose just because I don't open up with the right cards. This is how I feel like that's just how I play my Yu-Gi-Oh, man. And why do I not choose the pure Lightsworn is because I feel like it's too linear. It's way boring. You just rely on Judgment Dragon for almost everything. Yeah, Judgment Dragon is like your solution to everything, and I'm like, yeah, that's kind of boring a way to play. But that's just my personal opinion. So yeah, that's why I came up with this Twilight synchro deck build, and so far I find it really fun, really consistent, and it can maintain the field presence for quite a long time. Anyway, moving on to the next question, what is this deck supposed to do? Well, just like any other Lightsworn decks, this is a deck that is very dependent on milling cards. You basically mill cards to get access to most of the things in your deck. Unlike other decks who try to maintain hand advantage or field advantage, you try to main advantage through your graveyard. So that's just how crucial milling is to this deck. If you can't get your mills out early in the duel, then you're going to have a very hard time with your opponent. And it is a synchro variant, so you try to call out to your synchro monsters to absolutely wreck your opponent's field, or you just summon a powerhouse that your opponents just absolutely can't get over. This deck also tries to maintain field presence for a very long time using cards such as Kill Prisoner and Breakthrough Skill. So yeah, you try to let your synchro monsters live for a very long time so you can keep using its effect on your turn. And the final question is, how is it going to compete in the current meta? Well, as you probably know, the current meta is not exactly a slow one, but it's not really an OTK meta either. And it definitely has a lot of floaters and things that are just fine getting destroyed. Like, for example, the Fire and Ice Hands and the whole Yang Zing archetype, and it's like, oh, please destroy me. I don't even care. Um, so yeah, for that very reason, I make it so that this deck has a lot of access to cards that can banish, shuffle things back into the deck, and also, you know, the staple, the number 101 that can just steal your opponent's monster for free. So that's it for the introduction. next is the replays, and I hope you guys enjoy. Thank you.